Learned helplessness. This is going to be a little anxious for you. Here's what algebra is trying to teach you. See, I told you if you're angry. Just listen, just listen. It's a metaphor. Okay? Algebra means what? No, nobody's an Arabic speaker? Wait, you use Arabic numerals, but you don't speak Arabic? Okay, it means the mending. Okay? The image is of a broken stick. Sorry, I'm a psych major, not an art major. Two halves of a broken stick, and the equal sign joins the two sides of the stick. So what you do to this side, you got to do to that side. What you do above, you got to do below. You got to start at, if you remember your algebra, PEMDAS. Okay, what that means is do the hardest thing first. Okay? So part of the memes that I'm going to be teaching you about money health are about doing some of the hardest things first. Like first you got to look at what the problem is, right? And how money is power, but it's a particular form of power that has certain rules that you aren't necessarily taught the rules, except more is better, which makes you a great consumer, but it's not giving you the ability to act with skill. All right? So in order to do algebra, you basically have to have, so this is basically work this stuff in parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. Right? Hardest thing first. And then you do the in the correct order and you resolve the problem. So with algebra, what you have is you have the question, like the problem, and then you have an answer, and in between them is a process that, if you apply the process correctly, you get the right answer. And at each step of the process, that's what the difficult part is, and that's what makes math so intimidating, because you have to show your work, right? Any of you get long division? Hated long division. I actually even hated doing times tables. But once I got times tables, because this is before calculators, right? You could do long division, multiplication, etc., addition and subtraction. You could do algebra, and that's why those things are taught in that order. Like fractions drive people crazy. Right? It's just like it's a conceptual leap. But if your math teacher doesn't take the time to be patient with you, you are made now feel that this operation that, wait, you can count, you know how many fingers and toes you got, right? You know how much money you got. You know, you're supposed to be balancing your checkbook by doing subtraction each and every time. Right? So you know how much, no, it's not about how many checks you have. It's what you have, the amount of money that the bank says you have, and that's simple subtraction because that's what they're doing. Unless they charge you fees for stuff, which they might. So what usually hangs people up is that process, and where learned helplessness comes in is you have this point and that point, but you're unable to do this point, and you're not given the skills to persist when it's difficult. You give up when it's difficult. And, you know, some things it is difficult. Okay? And they're barriers. So that's why, for example, I'm just saying, in African American psychology, we teach people about the obstacles. We say, okay, there are organized systems of discrimination. They're barriers and walls to you until you learn how they work, and then they become stepping stones. To train people for the barriers until they're not barriers anymore. But part of the barriers is that information about how to work the process is being kept from you. Now, it is available, but assume that it's going to be hidden. So, for example, when she talked about her sister, okay, so theoretically, all right, you want to be, welfare was originally designed for, this is when we weren't allowing women into the workforce, and so if they were depending on a male breadwinner who got killed in the war, then we're basically going to, okay, support you for 5 years until you get back on your feet after you're over the grief and all that other kind of stuff. There was no stigma attached to it, right? But they didn't give grief training either. We didn't start doing that, well, we're not really doing that now, but, with PTSD and all these other things. So there are barriers, and the process is basically, people get hung up on working the little details that are difficult. And the thing with doing something difficult is it becomes easier the more you do it. You get used to it. And it becomes not a big deal. I can tell you that from 40 years of doing alcohol and drug work. Freaks people out. And look, it's life and death stuff, definitely. But it's actually fairly simple if you do the science. Your life would improve if you stopped doing this drug or these drugs. And they definitely have a lot of people have had horrific stuff happen to them. Particularly, when they drink into a blackout and you fall down and you break your neck and you're traumatically brain injured or whatever. Okay, so it's simple. Oh, you mean pot too? Yeah. Okay, great. Pot isn't crack, but it's not helping you. It's fogging your memory. It's hard for you to get, so here's the goal. Stop smoking for a minimum of 6 months. But I'll make it easier for you. Stop smoking weed for 28 days. Come back and see me in a week. So they did. Okay, when's the last time you used? Sunday. Okay, it's Tuesday. So, right, you got up to 3 days, and your goal was a week. Well, what do I do now? It's the same goal. Hasn't changed. But everybody I know smokes. Yeah, so you need to expand who you know to people who don't smoke. So try that, right? But it's still the same thing over and over. The process is, I'm not impatient. You didn't fail. You just found a way that didn't work to get to 7 days. So, in learned helplessness, so if you make the process clear, if there is a way out that has worked for people, then you teach that to other people. And you teach them to adapt it to themselves. Okay, sometimes not doing drugs, if drugs are the problem, is, okay, let's find something for you else to do to increase your brain health. Bottom line is you have to stop smoking. So now you need to exercise. Well, what about skateboarding? Okay, you breaking a sweat? Then no, do something more strenuous. Swim or whatever. Okay, so this is learned helplessness. Basically is when people don't have access to the information to prevent or get them out of the problem, then the problem becomes more expensive to fix over time. They're like digging themselves deeper. Now, it doesn't mean you can't get out at any time. As long as there's life, there's hope. But you have to work the difficult process. Okay? So part of what induced poverty is don't tell them the hidden rules of power. So, money health memes. Spend less than you make. Save what you don't spend. Budget. And when shopping, okay, there's that rule about don't shop while you're hungry, because that increases impulse buying. Make a list and stay within budget. And no impulse buys at all except out of entertainment budget, which means you had to have done the budget first. So there are some money books that are mentioned in the syllabus. Here they are again. They're in order of my favorite ones. So yeah, I've got actually all of these in my library. But part of what you have to understand is, like, even if you're doing something that you love and that you be paid, that you, if you weren't getting paid, you still do it as long as all the other things are equal. You kind of have to find that life purpose in your life before the money. But if you don't have your life purpose, you can actually look at what your life purpose is by creating a budget, and that will give you some priorities that you can then adjust. So life is like eating a manure sandwich. I know we're on television, so I'll be nice. The more bread you have, the less manure you eat. Or at least you can have better quality manure. So one illusion of money, more is better. Yeah? More might be better for some things, but what happens is that when you get more money, you often find ways to have larger leaks. So what is enough? So enough is enough is a kind of philosophy where you say, all right, I have not just enough to get by, but enough to feel comfortable and be able to do things that I'd like that are in line with whatever my core values and beliefs are. So if you don't know how to grow money, because it don't grow on trees, but there is seed money and weed money, and I don't mean marijuana, I mean money that basically either gets wasted or gets put into things that may or may not assist you in the long run. So it is helpful to know and be able to track and make a cartography of what your values are and where your budget is and where there are money leaks. So healthy way to look at money is fertilizing and nurturing possibilities. So that kind of goes along with compost and manure. So, excrement happens. When it does, do you micturate your money away? That's another way of saying urinate or piss your money away. So when people have emergencies, so when you have a plan, do you plan for the unknown to occur? You know, there's a saying within the 12-step program, shit happens, right? Or in academies, random anomalous events occur. When you're in the height of an addiction and you do things that have predictable results, it doesn't seem like, you know, why is this stuff happening to me? Shit happens, man. No, this is predictable. But you couldn't see it because you're in the fog of addiction. We often go unconscious with money because a lot of our experiences with money are traumatic. So we have to look at what that trauma is and kind of be clear about not replicating it. So part of what happens with the unknown is that there's always something that happens. So if you're going to plan for the unknown to occur, okay, it's never a question of whether the unknown will happen, it's always when. So you meet the unknown with, one, what you know, and you create a budget, and from your budget, create a long-term financial plan, which might include an emergency fund or a shit happens fund. So, ignorance is slavery. So if power is the capacity to be effective, what are the rules of the power of money? And knowing is better than not knowing, and ignoring, for example, a problem makes the problem go bigger, especially if you owe people money. So making small payments is better than no payments, and getting small payments from others is also better than no payments if people owe you money. So there's that old biblical thing about neither borrower nor lender be. Don't loan anybody any money unless you don't expect it to come back. So the rules of power. So electricity. Don't mix it directly with water, especially salt water. You can use water to make electricity, and you can use electricity to heat water. Both can be done following certain rules and using certain structure. So the rules for using any form of power, like money, are not immediately obvious. They're often hidden, but they are discoverable. So rich people don't necessarily know more about the rules of the power of money than those who are not rich. But there are structures in society that set it up that way so that they can learn. And they're also shielded from mistakes and wrongdoing. Yeah, so as an example, if you understand how certain financial instruments work, loans work, how your financial aid works, then you can avoid some of these pitfalls. So with respect to addictive behaviors, immediate abstinence is not always possible for everybody. So for example, with eating disorders, you can't just stop eating. So with heroin, methadone, oxycodone, opiates, methamphetamine, cocaine, immediate cold turkey, while desirable, is difficult for people who do not have the ability to tolerate extreme discomfort, which is part of the process. How do you go cold turkey from a money addiction? Well, first you got to acknowledge you have a problem or a money addiction. So part of that, with, say, abstaining from obvious money traps, the threefold pay yourself first. So you need an income or cash flow to do this. So 10% of your gross or net, whichever is most practical, or $1 a day, or a daily change jar, or you could do all three. Do you or can you have a savings account? So many savings accounts have a minimum, just like many financial instruments have a minimum. So let's say the minimum is $100. So $1 a day gives you a term to basically be able to have a savings account if you don't have one. Or 10%. So if you could do all three of those. And then the discipline and the hard part is basically sticking with that and not touching it, letting it grow. That's the hard part. But if you can get through that, then put that money in either the account or another secure location. So for example, the reason I talked about the rule of 72 the other day is basically looking at that table of how compounding interest works. So for example, if your savings account grows to the level of a 6-month CD, pays 5% interest or something like that, or putting it in a money market account, or basically CDs can essentially accumulate interest and grow, and you can't touch them because that's how they're structured. So rule of 72 we talked about already. So spend less than you make. Save what you don't spend. Pay yourself first. $1 a day, daily pocket and change in a jar, 10% of gross or net check. Invest what you save. So say there are saving investment vehicles that a lot of banks will allow you to play. So if you have a bank account, Christmas Club, so $25 a month or something like that. An individual retirement account, an educational individual retirement account, TSA, which is a tax sheltered annuity, which is usually a vehicle insurance companies use. It's kind of like a reverse life insurance. You basically pay into it, and then at a certain point, they've invested your money, and then eventually they start paying you after X amount of time. So, some suggested goals. An emergency fund, which could be as much as 6 months gross income, just for emergencies. Another goal could be debt freedom, knowing how much your debt is, and working towards that within a date certain. So, having an entertainment part of your budget, an entertainment fund or an investment fund. Educational funds, so retirement, if you're not in depending on what you can do in individual retirement accounts, many employers do 401ks, et cetera, et cetera. Now, in one sense, this is, a plan is better than no plan. This was basically designed to be generic across a bunch of different income levels, and probably would be difficult if you're on limited funding like welfare. But again, I have seen people get themselves off welfare. But welfare is structured so you don't. So you have to operate often outside of the structure to move beyond. And part of learned helplessness, another practical answer is the system conditions you to think of what's normal. And you have to basically go outside of that box to get ahead.